Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you for hanging out with us for the next hour or so. I know there is a lot going on in the world, so hopefully this can kind of serve as a leveling up opportunity for you, maybe get your mind off some of the craziness that's happening all over the world. But we've got a really interesting discussion lined up for you. Definitely excited for this one. And what we're going to be talking about is building revenue confidence. Know your risk, but recognize your potential. And this topic, of course, more relevant than ever. You know, we're all working through unexpected challenges and hopefully finding some opportunities along the way as well. So we're going to talk through a few different things, a few different angles of this. But a quick thank you before I introduce our guests to Dun & Bradstreet, which sponsored this webinar. You know, over the past 178 years, that's a long time, D&B has helped clients know their risk and their potential through the power of better decisions based on data and analytics. And their trusted data and analytics insights are perhaps now more important than ever, which I agree, as you look to kind of understand the impacts to your organization, your customers, and of course your pipeline. So without further ado, let's get into it. I want to introduce my two guests. I am joined by Chuck Merrill. Chuck, welcome, man.
Hey, what's going on, Scott?
Excited to have you on board. And as well, of course, Devin Golden. Devin, welcome.
Scott, thank you so much for having us.
Excited to have you both. And we'll get a little bit into your backgrounds, your superhero origin story, if you will. Before we get there, super quick housekeeping items. Number one, these are always recorded. So if this is your first time at a Sales Hacker webinar, thanks for hanging out. If not, you probably know that we do record these and we send it out to you within 24 hours. So I know there's a whole new slew of work from home distractions that happen. Maybe you have kids, maybe you got a new puppy, whatever it is. If you have to go and deal with something, we will send this out to you. And lastly, so we do these, you know, as much as I love hanging out with Chuck and Devin, we do put these on for the community. We've talked shop already in, you know, pre and warm up calls. So we would love it if you drove this conversation. So it's going to be a fireside chat. We've got some experienced sales minds on this call, and there is a chat feature there. So if you want to introduce yourself, your name, your title, always makes it way more fun when we actually know who we're hanging out with. And then if you have any actual questions, there's a Q&A portion at the bottom. That's where I'll be pulling questions from. So chat is to introduce yourself, say what's up, and then Q&A for any questions. And let's dive into it. Quickly, let's do the superhero origin stories. So Chuck, let's start with you. How did you come to work at D&B? Let's hear it.
Yeah. So pretty early on in my sales career, working at some other places, realized that I had an affinity for data, asking a lot of questions, and being really, really curious about what makes a customer's business tick. So with the combination of those three things, was able to land a gig at D&B 8+ years ago now. And it's been a great ride. Love the opportunities and what we do, and excited to talk with you all today about the broader landscape, and looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Eight years is a strong tenor in this kind of landscape where we see a lot of people jumping around, and certainly you've proved your worth tenfold, I'm sure, for being there that long. That's awesome, man.
It's a better question for Devin.
Absolutely, Chuck.
And Devin, let's hear the story of how you became a sales leader at such a cool company.
Sure. So I've been with the organization coming up on 6 years. I was actually part of an acquisition 3 years ago. I was part of the Inventions sales leadership team. And, from my perspective, why this has been a good marriage and why D&B has been a great place to work is, they offer a great deal of autonomy. They help us really use data to solve our customers' issues. And I've been fortunate to have people like Chuck that help makes our part of the organization hum and get great results for our customers. And just a quick tidbit, I'm going to age myself a little bit. My first job out of college, I worked for the 454th website on the entire internet.
Whoa.
So now everyone on the call can certainly know about how old I am. So
That's incredible. That's 454th. That's wild. What do you think that is up to today? Like,
it's got to be in the billions, I would think.
Billions. Yeah. Very cool. All right. So I'm going to extract some war stories before we get into this. But before we do that, I do want to do two quick polls. It's always nice when we get a pulse on who's joining us. So first poll is, what best describes your role? So we've got, BDR, AE, enterprise AE, sales management, sales leadership, sales ops, enablement, founders, other. And then it's also helpful, how large is your company? Are you a startup? Are you at a big enterprise company? Again, it will help us inform this discussion that we're going to have and kind of reframe some of our answers. And we will stop that in 3, 2, 1. All right, so we've got, reflective of how many BDRs and AEs there are relative to management. It looks, 12% coming from sales management, so that's strong. But we've got about 62%, if I'm doing that right. Yeah, about 62% are ICs. And then we've got 20% coming from leadership. Okay, that's all super helpful. And then let's see for company size. So a lot of kind of mid-market companies between 51 to 200. That's a large majority, 27%, but a pretty healthy mix. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone. And then the last one I want to do is, how are you tracking to your annual plan? I'm sure everyone is having some challenges that they did not expect as of January 1st. Devin, what do you think the audience is going to be? Do you think they're going to be skewing towards we're on target, skewing towards we're behind target? What are you thinking?
I think the people that come out to Sales Hacker to improve their selling skills, I believe this group is going to be on or exceeding target.
I love it. I love the positivity. Even with everything going on in the world, I think I'm going to agree with you there. I think if you're taking the time to level up, you're usually on it. Chuck, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Let's go for it.
All right. Got some positivity flowing. Shoot. All right. Well, this isn't overly surprising looking at kind of the macro trends going on in the world. 61% are behind target right now. 32% were on target. Only 6% exceeding target. So our optimism didn't help us here, and I do understand that with the world. Okay, so let's try and propose some solutions then to how we get more of those people into the bucket of exceeding target. But I think before we get there, without pointing too much at the obvious, Chuck, what are some of the top challenges that you're seeing in the current sales landscape that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for me, I think it's distractions. People are at home, a lot going on, kids, dogs, kids to be fed, dogs to be fed, and that goes for everybody, right? So I think trying to keep people on point, making sure that you do an excellent recap of every sales call so that you can pick up seamlessly from where you left off is really, really important. But I think overall distractions is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Distractions is huge. especially for those folks, at D&B, did you have a lot of remote workers before this, or did you have to shift a ton of people to remote?
Yeah, in our, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go for it.
I mean, in our particular part of the business, we were all co-located in 3 or 4 different locations.
Mm-hmm.
So the move to home was a little bit more challenging. I think that it challenged our reps and our leaders in terms of how to reallocate their time. It's the communal aspect of our selling environment where people are learning from one another that gets lost. That and ramping up new employees. Across the broader Dun & Bradstreet, we do have a lot of enterprise and field reps who are used to working from home. So I think they were able to adapt a little bit more in terms of their work. However, they were used to going out in front of their customers. And now obviously that part of the environment has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, such a big thing. Because I remember when I first started working remote, you almost see this initial dip because you have so many distractions. Once you kind of get your groove, you can sometimes get back that efficiency, but it is very difficult. To your point, Devin, is how do you make these communal aspects? How do you simulate the digital water cooler, if you will? Because that's a tough thing to do. Okay, so distractions, you lose the communal. Devin, anything else you want to add on top of there as challenges that you've seen as a leader of your team?
I think it's challenged the leaders in terms of how they interact with their reps, especially in an inside environment. The days of being able to drop in and drive by and say, hey, give me an update on what's going on with this deal or where do you need help was very informal. I think it put a lot more rigor and discipline for our leaders to maximize the time each day. The other thing that changes is I think people are working longer hours. So part of it is making sure that they're being productive and that they're getting the maximum return from the hours they put in. I know personally, after dinner, I'll sneak down for an hour, get some work done so I can set my day for the following day. Part of it is sort of that balancing act between increased productivity and burnout. We want to make sure that people, are fresh and that their calls and their interaction with their customers and prospects are of the highest quality, because it is a much different time from 3, 4, 5 months ago, as everyone on this call recognizes.
Yeah, I think it was it Harvard Business Review? Someone just, reputable source just came out with some stats outlining exactly what you said. I think people are working almost 2 hours longer now that they're working from home, which is pretty staggering. When I think people assumed it would be the opposite, but people are having difficulty kind of putting parameters around work-life balance, if you will. Okay, so those are the challenges. I think we can all agree on those challenges. Before we start trying to untangle some of this mess, I want to quickly, just because I know you guys, and we had a pre-webinar call, and I know you guys have such a great relationship, have worked together for a long time, and I just personally love to hear sales war stories, if you will. That always kind of gets my gears flowing a little bit, and largely, I'm sure it does the same with our audience. So I want to put you on the spot a little bit and hear a sales war story that you guys have shared, or it could be separate, so that we can get us all in the right frame of mind as we try and brainstorm on this topic a little bit. You got any war stories for me?
I have one in mind, Evan.
He's quickly going to check. Are we allowed to share this one?
we signed the virtual NDA, so I think we're good, Chuck.
Well, so when I first started reporting into Devin, as any salesperson knows, there's a little bit of a, should we call it like a leader break-in period, right? Where they kind of got to get used to your quirks and all that kind of good stuff. And so we were going through some invitations to calls that Devin wanted to join. And of course, I picked the best customer that I knew the most about, that I had the strongest relationship with and everything else. And 3 days before the call, we got a heads up that my champion was leaving the organization and that there was going to be a replacement. And when we got on the call, we'll just say that, she had a playbook that she wanted to run and it didn't necessarily include D&D at the time. So we went from having like this champion with this great story with this customer that I thought I was going to be able to show off to just like a complete rebuild, right? The good news is, we knew everything about what the customer was trying to do previously. We learned what she was looking to do very quickly, and we were able to pivot and adapt to the new strategy pretty quickly. And it ended up being that it's a good relationship to this day. But certainly after that first call with having your senior leader on there on your very first call that you've ever invited him to was interesting at the time, to say the least.
Oh, and I will say that I wouldn't have known that story if Chuck hadn't told me, because he did a great job, kind of tiptoeing around the situation. But I also think that we had the luxury within our business to talk to a lot of different personas and can solve a lot of different business issues. So what Chuck did really well and kind of got us off on the right foot was he turned and pivoted and started asking questions about specific business issues so that we could see which ones we could actually address, which took something that was potentially a really bad situation and someone who, had basically fired us for all intent and purposes and turned it into a positive because there were 2 or 3 other things around their digital strategy and their go-to-market strategy that we could solve. So, kudos to Chuck. And I think it's been smoother road since then, right, Chuck?
Yes, sir.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that one. So what do you think, just double clicking on that really quick, do you think the key to turning that into, ultimately a successful deal again was just kind of going back to the drawing board and doing deep discovery again? That's what it sounds like. Or what do you think were the main points that you kind of takeaways, if you will, from that story?
Yeah. I think we had to show a certain level of empathy. And, what's the old, not to be corny, what's the old saying? Like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? So I don't think I said a word the first 15 minutes, which, makes a lot of folks uncomfortable, but that's exactly like where I like to find myself, because then you're really letting them go and get into the root of what they need to do to be successful. And at the end of the day, people don't care about what you do. They care about what you're able to do for them. So it's kind of hard to pick up on that if they're not talking a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Getting them going. And then Devin, from the leadership perspective, I know you didn't actually even know this was happening until after the fact. From your vantage point, what would you say was the kind of the crux, or what made it all work and made it shift into a then successful relationship?
Sure. One of the things that I look for sales reps from a behavioral standpoint is being naturally curious and asking good questions to try to really understand. And I was impressed in that situation, even more after I found out the backstory, that Chuck kept asking really good questions to understand what was going on in their business. I mean, every business, not every business can a vendor solve a problem for, but you don't know until you start really understanding what they're going through and what their situation is. And, Chuck impressed me on, I say that was probably day 2 or 3, Chuck, right? By going through and really doing a thorough understanding of what made that organization a hum. And he was able to identify some broken glass that we could actually fix, which was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that. All right, so shifting back, thank you both for sharing the war story there. I'm sure more will come out as we kind of answer these questions. This one, Devin, I'm going to start with you on this one, a little bit more of a leadership perspective, but Chuck would love your thoughts as well after. So what steps are you taking right now to ensure that your team is really laser focused on the right accounts and the right opportunities? Because now I think it's more important than ever. If you're shooting at, entire industries, you could be, completely off the mark. So what steps have you taken to ensure that everyone's laser focused on your team right now?
Yeah, Scott, I mean, I think the most important thing is to really understand who your best and most profitable customers. And with that in mind is really trying to understand how the current situation has impacted them, whether it be, industry or geographically, and investing your time with those that you can have the most value for. So, everybody on this call is in different parts of the country. Some are more impacted than others, and the same with industries. And from my perspective, working with the teams, putting together a franchise plan that focuses on the ones that actually need our help and can do it. I mean, we're fortunate that as part of our business, we get tremendous amount of data, and it tells us information about, where people are in terms of their, accounts payable, et cetera. So we have an advantage that we share with our customers to help them really understand the health of their pipeline. We actually practice what we sell. So we look at our pipelines and understand which are ones that might be more distressed and make sure we focus our efforts on the ones that have the highest likelihood of finding value in what we're doing, and obviously looking for opportunities to help them grow their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the question, and I'll have this one for you, Chuck, is how do you look at it from an IC? How do you identify your best, most profitable customers in the first place? Is there exercises that you do with leadership, or how do you look at that?
So we always look at it in terms of, doing ideal customer profiles and really understanding who are the ones that get the most value from us. We're fortunate that we have multiple products that we sell. We call it the sales and marketing wheel. So we look and see how many of our products that they've purchased, and do the other products that we offer solve a problem that they actually have. So there's a natural migration to look at your customer base and look for opportunities to help them solve more problems. And then when we think about prospecting, going out to the market at large, are there others that look like our best customers that we should be focusing our efforts on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so how do you then, so you've got your ICPs, you've got the companies, which ones you want to focus on. Is there a way in this environment to identify those customers that are maybe in growth mode? And when I mean growth mode, I'm talking about, in this current environment, there seems to be almost like three buckets, right? There's the people that are really, really hurting. There's the people that are kind of just paused. And then there's the DoorDashes of the world, the companies that are in growth mode. Is there a way that Devin or Chuck, you guys are identifying those companies and going after them full force?
Yeah, and absolutely. And, I'm working at D&B and loving data. I'm spoiled, but the good news is, for anyone on the call that may be a D&B or a Hoover's product customer, we've actually cut loose all of the premium scoring elements like that. So growth trajectory, employee trajectory, normally those aren't directly available out of the box, and we're making all those available right now to help customers do exactly that, Scott. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, something that's available to anyone is a pipeline health scan, where we'll actually look and we'll analyze your opportunities that you have in pipeline right now today, and tell you, look, this is the headquarters is in a location severely impacted by COVID. They're in an industry that is severely impacted. They have 500 total family members, and 470 of them in total across the corporate family are in areas that are heavily impacted. So that, yes, you've identified the opportunity, but what's the risk in that opportunity? And that's something actually complementary that we're running that's available to anyone, customer or not.
Very cool. I like that. I would urge anyone on this call, pipeline health scan. Let's break that down a little bit. So if I am listening to this, I'm a leader, and I want to do my own kind of pipeline health scan internally. What things are you looking at? You mentioned a few: the area, so how affected it is, the industry. What else is kind of going into that pipeline health scan, Devin?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the other things that it looks like is like what was their health and what was going on before, right? Because if they were in trouble before, there's a high likelihood that this situation didn't make anything any better.
Right.
And then the final piece really is bringing that all together and assigning an overall score so that you know generally what the impact is. And then these are snapshots in time, right? So what we'll do is a lot of times customers will say, okay, well, this was great, but we want to do this every 2 weeks, right? So that we can be consistently forecasting and rolling up any type of new risk or where things may have been improved. And, one of the things that's been coming up a lot on the calls is, well, isn't every location impacted by the virus? And, something that I found there's something, I think it's like 1,200 counties that actually didn't have a single case, right? So it looks at all those different things and Texas has a much different impact than like where myself or Northern New Jersey, where our headquarters is, or myself in Philadelphia, right? So it looks at all those things and really brings everything together across not only those locations, but the corporate family so that you can really tell the holistic impact to the organization. It also looks at like what type of work they did before. Were they primarily work from home, where to how we began, that this is a very easy transition? Or is it something, manufacturing or hospitality related where you have to be there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other point, Scott, is that it changes over time, right? We've seen sort of an evolution of the situation. So it's really important to see not only how does it impact you now, but, does that change over time?
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. It's definitely not a one and done exercise, that's for sure. So just to reiterate some of that I heard. So area, the growth, what industry they're in, what industry they were in before, if they had remote workers, all great things to look at. The one I would add on there, which I imagine it probably includes, is also who their customer base is too. Has their customer base been affected? Another one to look at if you're looking at targets. Awesome. Okay, so we've kind of narrowed it down. We're laser focused on a target. Let's try and tackle, call it messaging. I've heard a lot of reps reach out and they're worried that even selling right now is inappropriate. How do you coach your sellers, Devin, to maybe adapt their approach so that they can get comfortable selling again?
I think part of it is a lot of the uncertainty is driven by oneself, right? Commerce must go on, the business must go on. So I think initially a lot of people struggle with being too empathetic and couldn't feel like they could have a business conversation. But I think we kind of know the situation we're in, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think it's time to say, can we ultimately help this business? Do I have a product or service that's going to add value to them? And then in many ways, I try to coach the team to feel like we have a responsibility to have those conversations. Some companies might be struggling, but if what we provide from a service can help them, not only is it going to help them get through the next, 30, 60, 90, what have you, but it's also going to help them with their exit velocity. So even if they're just kind of moving along at the same pace, how do they get ready themselves for when the economy opens up, people are ready to buy at a much more rapid pace? How do they accelerate and take advantage of the opportunity? We have clients that are coming to us now that are saying, hey, we know that we're, where we're located in our industry, that we're coming out of it. We want to have the maximum amount of velocity coming out of it so that we can take advantage of the market opportunity that's presenting itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it certainly seems like there will be just almost an overwhelming amount of pent-up demand in at least certain sectors. And, even finding those ways that you can add new, products or services. Like I love, a perfect example is the pipeline health scan. Like that is extremely helpful in this environment. And finding those things for your unique business is super important.
Chuck, the other thing just to point out is that
the
one thing I would tell reps is that there's going to be a change in folks that are involved in the buying process. You should expect that. So what it means is it could elongate your sales cycle. So that's all the more reason to have these really good sales conversations sooner and, get past the empathy stage. Empathy should be part of, obviously the conversation, but really focus on the fact that the sales cycle runs a risk of being elongated because now you're going to have people from finance and procurement that may not have played a bigger role or may go up a level or two within the function that you're selling to. So hesitation can cost opportunity. If you have a product or service that will solve a problem and help people during this particular time or in any time, it's really important to bring that message to them as quickly as possible and not wait.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I want to reiterate that one is kind of get in front of the fact that you may have new personas that you don't typically see in a deal. You mentioned a few, leadership is getting brought in more and more. Finance, seems like the CFO is signing off on just about anything right now that's getting done because there's just that extra level of scrutiny on spending. Procurement's probably getting in there. I know we've seen a lot of folks asking for concessions as well, which maybe is a topic we'll get into. And they're like, hey, we can maybe get this done, but we expect really, really good terms because they know that not a lot of deals are getting done. Chuck, going back to the original question, same question to you. How did you personally sort of get over that fear of, should I even be selling right now?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good point, and I think it is important to be empathetic to a degree. At the same time, we help companies target digitally, right? So, for me, it was really just about keeping the confidence that I've always had in our ability to help the end customer. And, I think that's important to keep in mind. To Devin's point, if you have a service that is going to benefit people in this new environment, you have a responsibility to get the word out there, explain it clearly and succinctly, and help them understand how it's going to impact them, right? So empathy, sure, but also, these people's jobs are to help their business grow. And if you have something to help them do that, why would they not want to talk to you?
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like I've had many of these conversations, and almost like if you were selling the proper way in the beginning, and you should always lead with empathy, and you should always do really, really deep discovery. If you were doing that, not a ton has to really change, right? You just keep going the way you were. All right, let's dive into some tactical tips. We'll start first with leadership with you, Devin, and then we'll go into some from Chuck. Devin, what are 3 hyper tactical tips for leaders in this environment? What would you coach your fellow sales leaders to do?
I think with everything that's going on, there's a lot more attention paid to forecasting within the business. So get ahead of your forecast. If you're normally looking 90, 120 days out, look further out because your ability to help the business understand what's going on and what the impact is really, really important. Mm-hmm. I think that, having an honest conversation with your clients around funding strategy is a really important thing that needs to happen because the dynamics of how things are going to get paid for and what's going on in the economy is really important, more so than in the past. And, I think it's really important to drive the next steps more so than anywhere else. There's a lot of distractions out there. People working from home, you can't necessarily get everyone in a conference room or easily get them on a conference call to make a decision. So really driving the conversation step by step to help get the best possible outcome are the 3 things that I would recommend for leaders and for reps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are big ones. And I want to go in a little more detail on a few of them because I think they're great. First one, so when you think about forecasting right now, and you're looking and you're trying to forecast 120 days out, what sort of factors are you taking into account? Because there's there's just so much in flux right now. Is there any strategies that you've seen work that help you more accurately forecast? Are you adding additional data points into your forecast? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so we do look at other data in terms of the company's overall health. We also look at their firmographics. We look at where they're located because that introduces risk. The best way to really solidify your forecast is to make sure that you're asking really good and strong questions around impact and value that they're perceiving with all of our clients, so that we get a better understanding. Because there's one company that Chuck and I are working on that we've had it forecasted 3 months in a row, and every time they come back and they say, well, not this month. So we've taken that off the forecast because we asked the right questions. We knew the state of their business, but the people that we were talking to were not tied in at the C level. Mm-hmm. So as a result of that, even though they wanted to move forward, they couldn't get the approval from above, which included the funding, which is so critical, obviously, to get a deal done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. And we have a question here quickly from the audience. It sounds like this is for you, Devin. What do you mean when you say funding strategy? Sure.
So not every time that we sell to a customer is budget allocated. So oftentimes it takes someone looking to other departments, looking at other reallocations of monies to try to get something done. So what I recommend that you do is that once you've identified what the cost of your service would be, and this is the assumption that they're interested, is to say, listen, this is an unbudgeted sale or unbudgeted expenditure on your end. Let's talk to all the people, all the stakeholders, all the people that are going to find value, and see if we can get budget from each one of them to make it easier to pay for a particular service.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Makes total sense. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I say in our world, it's sales leaders, it's marketing leaders, it's sales operations, it's marketing operations, it's finance. So, again, oftentimes it's not specifically allocated for our services, in which case we have to work with different groups to try to pull it all together. Got
it. Makes total sense. All right, let's go over to Chuck, more individual contributor hat on. What are 3 hyper-tactical tips from you, Chuck, that people should be focusing on in this environment if they're actually out there, selling in this environment?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think one would be, I guess maybe being creative is the right way to put it. And what I mean by that, like just a relevant example, we actually have a robotic process automation, 2 of them, customer in my portfolio, right? And I wouldn't say that that's a category that would normally like jump out at me, right? But with everything going on, if you believe like I do that now, anytime that there's a pandemic, we may experience some level of this, that robotic process automation is going to be really important to manufacturing companies to make sure that they can keep the production flat, even though there may be a loss of a human element, right? Yep. So being able to like think forward about what a company's value may look like coming out of this, I think is really, really important. And we've gotten conversations with both of them, right? So I don't know, we're 2 for 2. So what is it, like 90% of the time it works 100% of the time, right?
I love that.
I think that being creative.
So that's a great example. So what made that successful in my eyes is kind of this ability to look at some of the macro trends, predict the future a little bit, and then I assume you kind of brought that future to them. You said, hey, given this environment, this isn't going to be the last time something like this is going to happen. Are you setting yourself up for, maybe some pretty heavy growth over the next little while? And that was able at least to get you a foot in the door, was kind of that future telling, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah. More dripping on them about the future that we saw in their business, being curious about if they saw the same future, and like giving ideas about how we could help enable that vision. without specifically saying product X does this, product Y does this, right? More talking about capabilities in the concept of that future that we saw for the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that kind of way of thinking. There's a great book called Gap Selling that kind of walks through a similar thing where they've got the current state and you paint the picture of the future state, and your job is kind of to walk them over. So it's very much in line with that. All right, that's one golden piece of nugget. I'm holding you to two more. Let's keep it
all
rolling.
Right. Yeah, so I think another piece is that you can use the distractions and the long hours to your advantage. We did a study and looked at our own open rates from our marketing campaigns and saw how much earlier and how much later they were being opened, right? And I think most companies out there are still advertising in the traditional 9 to 5 window. But if you can get in there in that 7 to 9 or that 5 to 7, you're not competing with as much inbox space. And, whether you have like a sales automation or enablement tool that does that for you, or even something as simple as like a delay send in Microsoft Outlook, there's a lot of times I'll have 7, 8, 9, 10 emails queued up. I just open up my monitor in the morning and I'm making the kids breakfast, and, those emails are going out in that time window where I know there's going to be less competition.
Mm-hmm. That's another great one. I know I just look at myself as an example, and certainly I'm, checking emails way later than I typically would. So that's a great tip. And I know there was, I think about 30% were SDRs or appointment setters. So definitely everyone on a line who's out there building their own pipe, take that into account. And yeah, there's sales engagement tools that can schedule that for you. Perfect. All right, 2 of 3 down. One more. Let's go 3 for 3 for knocking it out of the park, Chuck.
All right. So, the other one, I'm a real believer in that sales is 90% mental. I think you get on roles in this business for a reason. And I think it has more to do with you than what's going on outside. So look, whatever anyone on the line needs to do to get like their head right for the day, walk on the beach, go for a run, listen to a meditation, yoga, whatever you need to do to get your day set. I think it's really important that you do so. And also, throughout the day, making sure that you set some type of block of window of time, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, to make sure that you're resetting to kind of juice up for the back half. Because it's a challenge, and, days can be stressful and long, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So, I think whatever you can do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself mentally, you're much better off.
Could not agree more. Yeah, it's a huge part of this. There's a great book I'll recommend. It's only like this big, so even if you're not a big reader, you can bang through it. It's called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and it's a quick, little fluffy read, but very tactical about how to set up your morning or create a space for yourself to do those things that kind of bring you joy, whether it's visualizing, meditating, exercising, you name it. Great advice. All right, we have another question from the audience here. We've got Dan. I'll let either of you answer this one. It's about no-shows, the dreaded no-show. We're seeing an increase in no-shows in our meetings. Any ideas or thoughts on how to combat this? Any thoughts there, guys? Do you have this problem? Do you ever see this, Chuck, that you'll book a meeting maybe with the newest robotic process automation company out there, and they don't show up? Do you ever have that happen, and how do you get ahead of that?
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it, because it used to happen like all the time, right? And it still does happen occasionally, but obviously the goal is to minimize it. You're never going to totally eliminate it. And, I think that clients are much more apt to join if they're really, really clear on the purpose of the meeting or what happened on the last call, and what you want to cover on this call, right? So meaning if it's the first time that you're setting it up, making sure that the topic is relevant to them, recap in the invite, and some type of email communication going out to them maybe 2 days before to really just plug on that desire for them to learn more, and make sure that you phrase it in a way that you don't answer everything in the email, right? Like you need to have a reason for them to join the call.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that call takes place, that's really the next stage is like, how do I get into the next one? I see it so many times where, reps will just be, thank you for taking the time. Great to talk with you today. Here's a flyer about our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not exactly like, lighting a desire, a need to really join the next call because they think they have everything that they need at that point, right? So how do you make sure that you are answering all the questions that they need, but also make them feel like there's more to come?
Yeah, and to add to that, Scott, I think a lot depends on what type of meetings they are, whether they're with clients or whether with prospects. I think from a client perspective, we always try to drive that next step, putting in writing, follow up with a calendar event. And, we don't see as many cancellations. I think it's on the sort of the SDR where you see a lot more.
Yep.
And then what I would have, Dan and other folks do is, make sure your messaging is all about them, because invariably, and to Chuck's point, very often the reps will talk about us and talk about products as opposed to solving specific business issues and helping them with their business. The more it's about the customer, we found the less of a drop-off rate we have. It does happen. The thing that's interesting about it is with virtual meetings, you have a bit of a captive audience. So if your messaging is really tight and it's all about the customers, we found that we haven't seen a huge drop-off. We do have some reps that aren't on script. And in those scenarios, we do see the drop-off because they're talking about products as opposed to business issues and outcomes. I don't know if that helps Dan at all.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And Dan, I'm assuming these appointments are virtual. We got a comment here from Keith saying, are your appointments virtual? I'm under the assumption they probably are in this current landscape, but if you want to give more color there. I think those were great tips. Adding that agenda, following up, making it about them, not us is huge. I'm always shocked. I know I was taught back in the end of the day, you send a calendar invite, there's an agenda. So I know what to expect. The amount of times something comes on my calendar and I have no idea what's going on. If something's going to get moved or pushed, it's going to be the ones that I look at and, don't know what's happening. They're much easier to push that way if there's not a detailed kind of breakdown. All right. So this one, Devin, let's go with you. And then after this question, I'm going to kind of shut up and let the community do the driving, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A for the next 10 minutes, just do some rapid fire. So Devin, you alluded to earlier, we both kind of think that there is going to be an accelerated growth once the economy starts to reopen. I think that's a shared sentiment from a lot of folks. Can you share some tips on how to ensure success, or at least set yourself up for success on the other side of this, whenever that is, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months right now? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of opportunities that presents itself as it relates to, exiting this situation that we're all in. One is making sure that your team is prepared to sell in the new environment. We talked a little bit about the pipeline health scan. It's really understanding, where do you want your team to invest their time? What are the prospects and customers you want them to focus on, so they don't waste time needlessly chasing parts of the opportunity in the white space that isn't valid. So I think that's number one. I think the other thing is trying to lay the groundwork now in terms of starting conversations, specifically for enterprise sales reps who want to be in front of people, so that you can start getting those appointments laid out and ready to go. Longer sales cycles, more complex sales cycles, if you don't begin them now, and looking at the poll where a fair percentage, I think 61% were behind plan, there is going to be a great opportunity to catch up in Q3 and Q4. But if you don't do the hard work and lay the groundwork now, it's going to make it that much more difficult to make up ground. So those are the things I'd have you think about. Think about your exit strategy. Consider in the new world order that we're in, that bringing finance in early and making sure you understand the risk associated with selling to specific customers. Because in the sales world, we're always excited when we get something signed, but if they can't pay for it, that's problematic. So making sure you understand whether or not these customers are ones that are going to be able to pay the bill, because no one wants to get something backed out. No one wants to be, celebrating a victory only to have it taken away from them because they don't pay their bill. So, get to know your customer and understand that piece of it. But between enabling your sales force, getting them ready to really accelerate, starting the pipeline, and thinking about exit velocity, these are all the things that we talk about. Many of us obviously do more business in the back end of the year. So making sure that your team doesn't burn out. So when we get out of this and things return to a more normal state, that they have the energy, the motivation, and the sight line in terms of how to get to where they need to get to for the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is all great advice. And to that last point, make sure they don't burn themselves out. Almost like force some people to take some time off. I feel like everyone feels weird about taking time off. It's like, well, I'm at home all the time. Like, what am I going to do? I think it's really important as a leader to kind of instate, hey, take some time off, do what you want, read a book, go for a drive, whatever it is. Anything, Chuck, you would add to that? How are you looking at coming out the other side of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Devin said. I think it's really important to identify the companies that are well positioned for the new normal. And, even outside of like a traditional data resource, I mean, you look at still people that are putting their advertisements on billboards or CNBC or whatever your news channel of choice is, right? Look at the companies that are being talked about that are still in growth mode or companies to watch. I think there's a lot of creative ways. Like sometimes we get so wrapped up in the sales tools that we have on our computer, we kind of forget to look at the world around us and kind of pick things up from there as well. So that's something that I try to be cognizant of every day.
Yeah. Scott, another thing that people should think about, specifically the leaders on this call, is that with all this pent up vacation time, it does introduce risk at the end of the year, not only for sales reps, but also for supporting groups. So finance, things of that nature. So it's something to be aware of and put into your plan. We do encourage, and Chuck's always going fishing, so that's good. We do encourage our reps to take time off now, because as a sales leader, I simply can't have 70% of my staff off all of December. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. And as you think about the burnout, it's important that they take days here, day there, 2 or 3 days, and really recharge their engines, because this time and people working from home, there's a lot more stress in the system. There's a lot more in terms of, oversight, because people, they don't have them in the office. So they want to see what everyone's doing. It's really important that people take time for themselves, take a chance, that now in many cases, you're home with your family, and use that as an opportunity to spend more time with them. Because, all the people on this call probably work incredibly hard. That's why they're attending Sales Hacker, to get better at their craft. But remember that, keep in mind that all this vacation time is being piled up. And, for the sales reps on the call, I encourage you to take the time, revitalize yourself. And from a leaders, it's a trap to be careful of. Make sure you know what your team's doing, because you want them to be fresh, but you also don't want to have a situation where, like I said, 70% of your staff wants to take the last 2 or 3 weeks off the year.
Yeah, that's another excellent tip for the leaders on the call, and something that I don't know everyone's thinking about, but yeah, that could pose some serious issues in the later half of the year. All right, we got 2 questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Keely, thank you for the question. Keely wants to know, where can I access this pipeline health scan? I assume that's probably something D&B will send out after this webinar. We'll make sure that everyone has access to that. Second one is from Lynn, probably more Devin for you. This is one that I actually get a lot through this. Did you adjust your goals and targets at Dun & Bradstreet?
We didn't. We did not adjust our goals and targets. Um, you know, we've been relatively fortunate, knock on wood, that because of what we do and how we help companies, it hasn't had as big of an impact as it certainly could have. You know, I think that, you know, the people on my staff, like Chuck and some of his peers, are really good about getting ahead of it and have spent a lot of time with their customers. But, you know, we have had some impact. You know, my forecast isn't quite where I'd like it to be, so we got some work to do, certainly. But no, we weren't fortunate enough to adjust our goals. So unfortunately, we're going to have to hustle the second half of the year.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a sentiment that a lot of companies, at least I'm talking to, it's the same. It's, you know, business as usual and things have to get done. Of course, there's some industries that not thinking that way, of course. But okay, last question. This is one of my favorite questions to ask. And you guys are both very successful, you know, sales leaders, sales executives, and a lot of people on this call. You know, we had, you know, a lot of younger folks and people that probably aspire to have similar careers to both you've had. So my question is, and I'm going to start with you, Chuck, and then Devin, go to you. If I had a time machine and I can magically take you back to yourself, Chuck, at 24, I'm not sure, when you started your sales career, let's say your first day starting your sales career, what do you tell Chuck of 24?
Other than take better care of your hair. No, you know, look, persistence, positive attitude. You know, I think when I was 24, I got like, I let my emotions control a lot of things, right? Which in sales is typically not the way to go. And look, I mean, I think the most important thing is, you know, be really, really curious about what the customer is looking to do and what success means for them personally, right? Because the prospect or the customer that you get promoted is a customer for life.
Yeah, those are great ones. Reiterate those: persistence, positivity, just an insatiable kind of curiosity that will take you extremely far. And then don't take things personally. And then, yeah, try and tie all your conversations to the individual gain, not just the organizational gain. I think that's great advice. Devin, take us home with what you would tell yourself when you are first starting your career.
Well, I think, you know, similar follicle challenge as Chuck, so I would probably try to address that earlier on. You know, I think for me, it's all about the customer, right? It really focus and be customer centric, you know, be naturally curious. You know, for me, from a development standpoint, think about where you want to get to and build a plan to get there. You know, I always had a philosophy that, you know, I think, you know, I'm pretty smart, I guess, but, you know, I'm not going to be outworked by the guy or gal next to me. So, you know, I always try to put in extra time and always try to, you know, to really outwork the person to my right or my left. And if I did a good job, then good opportunities would present themselves. And I still have that, that philosophy. I think it's important to build relationships within your team, within your organization. And it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you deal with day in, day out. You know, Chuck and I, you know, we talk 2 or 3, 4 times a week, but there are people in operations or there are people in finance that I invest time in because I know that by having those conversations, they get to know you a little bit better. It helps you in terms of navigating some of the departments that impact your success. And I wish I had learned that a little bit earlier on. You know, it's not being political for the sake of being political. It's really trying to help you and your team be more successful by understanding what the pitfalls are working with other departments that may not have the same vested interest. You know, in sales, you know, our interest is try to satisfy a customer and close a deal. Other departments have different objectives.
Yeah, those are great. So outline your goal, work backwards from that goal, never be outworked. That's a huge one. And then, spend time building those internal relationships, which maybe don't immediately seem to give you a direct benefit, will help you get things done a lot faster internally. And also, just in your career, you also just never know, the next jump you make or the next place you go to, who can be, open a door for you. I love it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was great advice. It's been a lot of fun hanging out. That is our time. That takes us to the hour. But if people on this call maybe want to continue the conversation, are you both on LinkedIn? Is that the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Well, thank you both again. And for all those who hung out with us, thank you as always. We really appreciate it. Thanks for the great engagement throughout. And we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Scott.
Thanks, Scott.